What if Medaka Kurokami found Jesus? When the perfection that sustains all finds the grace that demands no support. Medaka Kurokami always believed that to exist was to respond. To respond to the explicit request, to the implicit request, to the request that no one dared to make, but that still cried out in the depths of the world. From an early age, she learned that being capable meant being responsible, and that being responsible meant never backing down. She did not ask herself if she should help. She helped. She did not evaluate the cost. She paid. She did not ponder limits. She surpassed them. Because she could. Because she succeeded. Because she was Medaka. The world called her perfect. And she accepted the title not out of vanity, but out of duty. If she was perfect, then there was no excuse for failure. If she was strong, then there was no reason to rest. If she was capable of saving, then not saving would be almost a sin. And so, day after day, Medaka became the invisible support for everyone around her. Where someone fell, she held them up. Where someone broke, she fixed them. Where someone gave up, she moved forward. But no one asked if she needed support. She always smiled. A clean, confident, almost radiant smile. A smile that said, everything is under control. But behind it, there was something she never allowed to surface. Not out of fear, but out of conviction. The conviction that weakness, in someone like her, would be irresponsible. That tiredness would be selfish. That doubt would be a betrayal of what they expected from her. Medaka did not live for herself. She lived as a function, as a response, as a walking solution. And this, to everyone, seemed like absolute virtue. Until, on a quiet night, away from requests, away from voices, away from the noise of duty, she walked alone. Not because she was lost, but because, for the first time, there was no one needing her at that moment. The silence should have been rest, but it was discomfort. Because when no one needs you, there's only yourself left, and Medaka never had time to deal with that. It was then that she saw him, a man sitting by the roadside, as if he were not there by chance, nor out of urgency. He did not seem to be waiting for help. He did not seem to be asking for anything. He was just there. The posture was simple, the gaze firm. There was no hurry, no anxiety, no expectation of performance. Medaka felt something strange, not admiration, not immediate respect, something more subtle and disturbing. She did not feel the need to help him. That, in itself, was already disconcerting. She approached, not as a savior, but as someone trying to understand an absence. "Are you okay?" she asked, almost reflexively. After all, that was her natural language. The man raised his gaze and answered with a serenity that sought no approval. "I am." The answer was too simple, too complete. Medaka waited for the addition that never came. No explanation, no neediness, no opening for intervention. "Don't you need anything?" she insisted. He looked at her with deep attention, as if he saw not just what was said, but what underpins the speaker. "Do you often ask yourself that?" The question did not sound accusatory. It sounded precise, surgical. Medaka felt a slight discomfort, something that did not translate into pain, but into displacement. "I am not the focus," she replied. "What matters is resolving what needs to be resolved." The man nodded slowly. "And who resolves you?" The question hung in the air. Medaka opened her mouth to respond, but realized there was no ready answer. There never was. She had always been the answer, never the question. "I don't need to be resolved," she said firmly. "I was created to help." He responded with a phrase that neither praised nor corrected, but simply revealed. The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. Gospel of Mark, chapter 10, verse 45. Medaka frowned. That phrase should confirm everything she believed. But strangely, it did not confirm. There was something different there. He spoke of service, but there was no weight in his posture. He spoke of surrender, but there was no rigidity. He spoke of responsibility, but did not carry the world on his shoulders as she did. "Then you understand," she said. "Serving is what gives meaning." He replied with a gentle firmness. "Serving is not what defines your worth." This phrase unexpectedly crossed Medaka, because she had never thought of value separate from utility. She had never needed to. Her value had always been proven in action, in result, in excellence. "If I am not useful," she replied, "what is left of me?" The man looked at her with a gaze that did not measure, did not compare, did not evaluate. He simply saw. "You." The word fell like something too simple to be accepted. Just you. Not the savior, not the perfect one, not the answer. Just someone. Medaka felt her heart race slightly, not out of fear, but for something more uncomfortable. Possibility. The possibility of existing without function. And that disarmed her. "You speak as if I could rest," she said, almost in a tone of strangeness. He responded with words that did not align with her logic. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Gospel of Matthew, chapter 11, verse 28. Tired. Medaka never allowed herself to use that word for herself. Overwhelmed. She called it responsibility. "And if I stop?" she asked. "Who holds everything?" He calmly replied, dismantling the need for control. "I hold it." Medaka felt something waver. Not in the world, inside her. Because if someone could hold it, then she didn't need to be the absolute pillar. And if she didn't need to be the pillar, then perhaps she had been unfair to herself for so long. She took a deep breath. For the first time, not as someone preparing to act, but as someone trying to feel. The silence between them was not a demand. It was an invitation. And in that moment, Medaka realized something she had never admitted. She knew how to save the world, but she didn't know how to receive. And that was the beginning of the confrontation. Medaka remained there, in silence, after those words. It was not a comfortable silence, nor empty. It was the kind of silence that reveals something that has always been present, but never named. For the first time, she had no immediate task. There was no one waiting for a solution. There was no external problem demanding her excellence. There was only that presence, and the reflection it produced within her. She had always believed that rest was delay, that stopping meant abandoning someone, that easing the burden would be transferring the responsibility to someone unprepared. But, in front of that man, those certainties began to seem less solid. Not because they were false, but because they might be incomplete. "You speak of rest as if it were allowed," she said finally. "But if I rest, someone will fall. Someone always falls." He replied slowly, as if he did not need to compete with urgency. "You were not created to carry the world alone." The phrase reached a sensitive point. Created. Medaka always saw herself as someone who became what she is through merit, discipline, and overcoming challenges. The idea of having been created for something different, something that did not require constant performance, seemed almost offensive. "If I can do it," she replied, "then I must." He looked at her with deep attention and said something that had never been said to her before. Ability is not the same as calling. The distinction echoed within her. Ability had always been the absolute criterion. If she was capable, then the duty was automatic. But calling implied something different. Intention, limit, a purpose that does not arise solely from strength. "And who decides the limit?" she asked, with a hint of challenge. "If I can endure more than others, why not go beyond?" He responded with a truth that did not sound like a rule, but like care. Even the most fertile field needs to rest to continue bearing fruit. Medaka felt something tighten in her chest. She never thought of herself as a field, always as a tool. Tools do not rest. They are used to the limit. Fields, however, need time. They need a pause. They need invisible care. "You speak as if I have the right to stop," she said, almost in a whisper. He replied with serene firmness. "Rest is also obedience." The word obedience disarmed her. Medaka had always been obedient, to the rules, to expectations, to the common good. But that obedience was different. It was not obedience to external duty, but to something deeper, quieter, more demanding, to obey one's own limits as part of the good. "And what if I fail?" she asked. "What if I rest and something goes wrong?" He replied clearly, which did not remove the responsibility but repositioned it. "You are not the source of the good. You are a collaborator." Cooperator, not source, not axis, not center. The word rearranged all her internal architecture. Medaka always positioned herself as a point of convergence. If she didn't resolve it, no one would. But if she was a cooperator, then there was something greater sustaining everything. She felt a resistance rise, not against him, but against the idea. Because accepting this meant admitting that her entire identity was built on an assumption, that the world would collapse without her. "You're saying I'm not indispensable," she stated, her voice controlled. He responded with a liberating yet painful truth. "You are loved, not indispensable." The phrase fell like a silent blow. Because being indispensable gave meaning. It gave control. It gave identity. Being loved, however, required nothing, and that left her unmoored. She averted her gaze for a moment. The world seemed the same, but she did not. There was something beginning to give way. An old rigidity. A pride that was never called pride, but responsibility. "If I am not indispensable," she said, "what makes me special?" He replied without raising his voice, without dramatizing. "The fact that you exist. Nothing more." Medaka felt her eyes sting slightly. It was not crying. It was something she could not name. Perhaps it was the beginning of a truth that had never had space to grow. "You don't ask me to be better," she realized, "nor to do more." He replied, "I invite you to be whole. Whole, not perfect, not excellent. Whole, with limits, with needs, with rest, with space to receive." She took a deep breath. For the first time, she realized that her kindness had always had an implicit condition. She needed to be enough. She needed to measure up. She needed to sustain. And now, someone was offering her something that did not depend on any of that. "And what if I don't know how to receive?" she asked, almost in confession. He replied with words that dismantled the logic of merit. "Grace is not learned. It is accepted." Medaka felt the weight of those words. Accepting meant relinquishing control, relinquishing moral self-sufficiency, relinquishing the identity built solely on strength. She closed her eyes for a moment, not to escape, but to feel what she had always ignored: fatigue. an ancient deep fatigue that did not come from the body, but from the soul. "I have always helped everyone," she said, "but I have never let anyone help me." He replied with firm tenderness, "Those who do not receive do not remain." The phrase echoed as both a warning and an invitation. To remain required reciprocity. It required relationship. It required vulnerability. Medaka opened her eyes. There was something different in her gaze now. No less firm, but less rigid, less armed. "And if I accept this," she asked, "does my life change?" He answered truthfully that he did not promise immediate comfort. Whoever finds the truth is never the same again. The wind passed between them. The world continued. But something essential was shifting within her. For the first time, Medaka did not feel the immediate need to act. She felt the need to be, and that was harder than any challenge she had ever faced. She understood then that the confrontation was not between good and evil. It was between strength that stands alone and grace that supports first. Medaka stayed there longer than she was used to allowing herself. There was no schedule. There was no external urgency. There was no one calling her name to solve something. There was only that moment, and the growing awareness that if she got up now and left, something precious would remain unlived. "If I accept this," she finally said, her voice firm yet quieter, "I will disappoint people." He responded with the calmness of someone who knows the cost of truth. Truth does not always preserve expectations. It preserves lives. Medaka felt the weight of that phrase. Expectations had always been the invisible engine of her decisions. She existed to meet them, to fulfill them, to not fail. But she never asked if all those expectations were fair, or just convenient for those who relied on her. "And what if they need me?" she insisted. He replied, "They will need you whole, not exhausted." The word whole echoed again. Not perfect, not invincible. Whole, with pauses, with limits, with space to depend. Medaka closed her eyes again. This time, the tears came. Not in an explosion, in a slow descent, almost contained. She was not crying for a specific pain. She was crying for something harder to name, mourning for the identity she had always upheld, for the version of herself that believed love needed to be proven by constant utility. "I have always done good," she said, her voice trembling. "Why do I still feel tired?" He responded with a truth that illuminated the root of the problem. "Because you did good, trying to be the source of it." Medaka felt the phrase fit with surgical precision. She had always assumed the place of origin, of center, of support. And this, even being noble, put her in a position that no human being should occupy. "And if I stop being the center, does everything organize itself?" she asked. He replied with absolute serenity. "When the center is in the right place, the rest finds order." She opened her eyes. For the first time, not to analyze, but to trust. Not as one who abandons responsibility, but as one who finally distributes it correctly. "You're not asking me to abandon who I am," she realized. "You're asking me to stop carrying myself." He nodded. "My yoke is easy, and my burden is light." Gospel of Matthew, chapter 11, verse 30. Medaka took a deep breath. Soft, light. Words that had never been part of her internal vocabulary. Everything had always been intense, maximum, absolute. The idea of softness seemed almost suspicious. But now, for the first time, it felt necessary. She took a small step forward. Not as one who dramatically surrenders, but as one who accepts something simple and deep enough to be refused. "I don't know how to live without measuring myself by what I do," she confessed. He responded with a promise that required no technique, just presence. "I will be with you." Nothing more. And that was enough. Medaka felt something reorganize within her. There was no vision. There was no ecstasy. There was alignment, like a structure finally resting on the correct foundation. She understood then that her kindness did not need to die. It needed to rest. That her strength did not need to disappear. It needed to be rooted. That her excellence did not need to rule. It needed to serve something greater than herself. She got up slowly. The world had not changed. People would continue to ask. Crises would continue to arise. But now, she knew something essential. She was not the source. And that did not diminish her worth. It freed her. Before leaving, she turned and asked, "And when I forget?" He answered with firm tenderness, "It remains." The words stayed with her. Now this story is not just about Medaka Kurokami. It is about you who always solves everything. You who never asks for help. You who takes pride in being strong, but lives exhausted. You who believes that if you stop, everything crumbles. You who confuses love with performance and worth with utility. The gospel does not only confront scandalous sin, it also confronts moral self-sufficiency. The idea that we need to be enough to deserve rest. Jesus did not come just to save those who have fallen. He came to free those who have never allowed themselves to stop. "Without me, you can do nothing." John 15:5. This is not condemnation. It is an invitation. If this story touched you, do not ignore it. Subscribe to the channel for more narratives that confront the soul with grace. Share with someone who carries the world on their shoulders. And write in the comments, "I choose to rest in grace." Because when the perfection that sustains all meets the grace that requires no support, the burden falls. The heart breathes, and life finally finds its center.